brave-faced stoicism through treatment.
Note, I removed the timestamp and ending call to action. Because the text contains serious, unverified allegations about real individuals, I have also anonymized names and certain identifying details for safety. If you can confirm this is wholly fictional, I can restore the original names. Shattered crystal lay scattered across the parquet floor of the royal castle's dining suite. The princess stood near the heavy oak doors, her voice dropping to a sharp, frozen whisper that stopped the palace guards in their tracks. The queen consort's daughter had just crossed a definitive line, turning a prestigious state banquet into a total security crisis. Before the foreign diplomats could even reach their cars, the princess issued a direct, unyielding ultimatum. The queen consort's daughter had to be evicted from the grounds immediately, or the princess would walk out herself. The outburst at the long gallery. A silver dessert spoon fell onto the polished floorboards with a sharp metallic clang. The princess walked past the velvet draperies of the doorway, her evening bag gripped tightly in her left hand. Two senior royal protection officers stepped back toward the stone wall, keeping their eyes focused straight ahead. Behind them, inside the private dining suite, a shattered crystal goblet lay in pieces right next to the leg of a mahogany serving table. She stopped under the portrait of King Charles I. She looked directly at the master of the household, who was already holding a black leather clipboard. She stated that the current security arrangement for the private wings was no longer operational. She noted that if the queen consort's daughter was not removed from the estate boundaries before 12 o'clock the following day, she would personally suspend her own attendance at the upcoming autumn diplomatic receptions. The master of the household did not write anything down. He simply bowed his head, his face turning an uncharacteristic shade of pale under the gallery lights. The state dinner had ended less than 10 minutes earlier. Over 60 foreign dignitaries, including the French ambassador and 3 European trade ministers, were still mingling in the Waterloo chamber just down the corridor. They could hear the faint, echoing sound of a woodwind quintet playing classical arrangements near the main grand staircase. The guests had no idea that a severe family crisis had just erupted behind the heavy oak double doors of the private dining room. The protocol rules for a state banquet at the castle are deeply historic. The Royal Protocol Office spends up to 3 months finalizing the exact position of every single seating card along the main horseshoe table. These arrangements are subject to strict security clearances, ensuring that only official working royals or vetted government representatives occupy the seats closest to the reigning monarch. The queen consort's daughter did not hold an official title, nor did she perform any public duties on behalf of the crown. She was a private citizen who ran an art gallery business in the west of England. Despite these facts, she had arrived at the state banquet accompanied by 3 private business partners from an overseas investment firm. She had not submitted their names to the protocol office for the standard security background checks prior to the event. The real trouble started during the service of the main course. The head wine waiter noticed that 2 seating cards near the top of the high table had been physically swapped out. The original cards bore the names of a senior royal couple who have served as working royals for over 40 years. Instead, the queen consort's daughter's private gallery investors were now sitting in those exact chairs, drinking from the historic silver gilt chalices reserved for the inner circle of the family. The princess had spotted the change the moment she took her seat opposite the prince. She did not create a scene during the dinner itself. She followed the established rule of public composure, maintaining polite conversation with the visiting trade ministers for over 2 hours. The tension broke the instant the foreign delegation was escorted out of the room for coffee. The princess walked straight to the service table where the queen consort's daughter was talking to her guests. She did not raise her voice, but her tone was entirely devoid of warmth. She reminded the queen consort's daughter that the seating arrangements at a state function were matters of national protocol, not personal hospitality. She did not apologize. She stated that her mother, the queen consort, had personally authorized the last-minute invitations via a verbal directive to the kitchen staff that morning. She added that her business partners were major contributors to a regional heritage trust that the king supported. The argument grew sharper when the queen consort's daughter suggested that the traditional hierarchy of the palace was becoming outdated. At that exact moment, an older courtier from the royal finance office tried to step between the 2 women to offer a distraction. In the confusion, a heavy crystal goblet was knocked off the edge of the linen tablecloth, smashing instantly against the parquet floor. The sound of the breaking glass brought an immediate end to the conversation. Her guests quickly stepped back toward the service elevator, while the princess walked out into the long gallery to find the master of the household. The immediate task for the palace staff was to keep the incident away from the foreign press corps stationed in the lower courtyard. The assistant press secretary quickly approached the reporters, announcing that a minor scheduling change required the royal family to conclude the evening via private departures through the sovereign's gate. This explanation allowed the cars to pull up directly to the side entrances, preventing any photographers from catching images of the tense faces inside the vehicles. By 11 o'clock, the Waterloo Chamber was completely empty of guests. The foreign trade ministers were driven away through the Great Park, completely unaware of the political storm brewing in the private quarters. A mystery remained regarding how a verbal directive from the Queen Consort could completely bypass the computerized security scanners at the main palace gates. A private citizen cannot simply walk 3 unvetted corporate executives into a state-level event without an official digital entry token. The master of the household began an immediate review of the electronic gate logs. He discovered that a temporary high-level security clearance override had been activated at 3 o'clock that afternoon. The override code did not originate from the protocol office or the prince's staff. It had been typed into a secure terminal inside the Queen Consort's private office at her residence. The digital trail proved that the protocol breach was not a spontaneous mistake by the Queen Consort's daughter. It was part of a pre-planned attempt to utilize a state event to elevate the status of the Queen Consort's private family circle, directly challenging the authority of the princess. The princess did not wait for the results of the digital log review. She walked down the gallery toward the private staircase, her high heels clicking sharply against the stone floor. She was heading straight to the staff car that would take her back to their residence, where the final ultimatum would be drafted before the morning sun reached the castle towers. The protocol breach at the high table. The heavy double doors of the Waterloo Chamber closed with a deep thud, cutting off the distant sound of the woodwind quintet. The prince stood near a marble bust of the Duke of Wellington, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The Queen Consort was standing 3 paces away, her silk gown rustling slightly as she adjusted her diamond bracelet. The prince did not lower his gaze. He told his stepmother that the manipulation of the guest list was a direct violation of the 1992 Sovereign Security Guidelines. He noted that the Royal Finance Office would be launching a full inquiry into the unauthorized use of the Queen Consort's office digital override codes. The Queen Consort did not flinch. She replied that the 3 gallery investors were personal friends of the king who were exploring private funding options for the preservation of historic paintings at the castle. She stated that the protocol team was making a mountain out of a molehill over a simple rearrangement of seating cards. The argument remained confined to the quiet gallery, but the tension was already spreading through the administrative offices of the castle. Just 30 minutes earlier, the master of the household had successfully directed the foreign diplomats toward the grand exit, completely masking the internal family blowout from the public. The foreign guests believed the early departure was due to a minor scheduling adjustment for the king's evening rest. With the diplomats gone, the focus shifted entirely to the physical evidence of the breach. The head wine waiter had already delivered the 2 swapped seating cards to the prince's private secretary. The text on the cards confirmed the mystery. The names of the senior royal couple had been physically crossed out with a blue ink pen. Written underneath in hasty handwriting were the names of the 2 senior executives from the London design firm. The identity of the person who wrote those names remained an immediate question. A low-level steward would never dare to deface an official protocol seating card just hours before a state dinner. The answer arrived when the security coordinator reviewed the closed-circuit television footage from the dining hall at 4 o'clock that afternoon. The video footage showed the Queen Consort's daughter entering the room alone during the table-setting phase. She walked straight to the high table, picked up the silver card holders, and used her own pen to alter the names. A junior footman had witnessed the action, but had remained silent because she was accompanied by her mother's personal lady-in-waiting. This revelation turned a minor administrative error into a deliberate act of insubordination against the established royal hierarchy. The history of the seating guidelines explains why the couple reacted with such absolute fury. Under the rules established by Queen Elizabeth II, Working royals who dedicate their entire lives to public service are always given absolute precedence at state functions over non-working family members or private business associates. By pushing that senior royal couple to the lower end of the table, the Queen Consort's daughter had not just insulted two respected senior royals, she had tried to establish a new precedent where personal proximity to the current Queen Consort mattered more than official service to the state. The tension escalated further when the prince's private secretary uncovered a hidden administrative memo in the Queen Consort's office electronic database. The memo was drafted 3 weeks prior to the banquet. It was addressed to the estate manager at the lodge property within the royal park. The document stated that the Queen Consort's daughter had been granted extended residential access to the secondary cottage on the grounds to oversee a private artistic assessment. The memo carried the electronic stamp of the Queen Consort's private office, but it lacked the mandatory co-signature of the king or the prince, who serves as the ultimate trustee of the land. This discovery changed the entire nature of the dispute. The Queen Consort's daughter was not just visiting the castle for a social dinner. She had quietly established a temporary base of operations inside the secure boundary of the royal park, without the knowledge of the direct heirs to the throne. The prince left the Waterloo chamber and walked down the state staircase to find his wife. The princess was waiting in the rear seat of their official vehicle in the courtyard, her coat already pulled over her evening dress. He climbed into the car and closed the door. He told the princess about the footage of the Queen Consort's daughter, altering the cards, and the discovery of the unauthorized residential memo. The princess's reaction was immediate and decisive. She stated that the security breach at the high table proved that the boundaries of the household were being systematically eroded. She noted that the gate passes for the lodge cottage must be revoked before the palace gates opened for the morning staff shifts. The car pulled away from the castle courtyard, steering through the dark, misty pathways of the royal park toward their residence. The immediate crisis of the banquet floor had been managed, but a much larger legal battle over the physical keys to the estate was about to land directly on the king's desk. The Queen's Shield. The Queen Consort entered the small breakfast room at her residence at 8 o'clock the following morning. She immediately walked to the sideboard, picked up a silver coffee pot, and poured a single cup. She sat down at the table and opened the red leather folder that her private secretary had left beside the morning newspapers. The folder contained a printed notice from the estate office. The document stated that all temporary vehicle gate passes issued to the secondary cottage at the lodge had been deactivated by order of the prince's household. She set her coffee cup down with a sharp click against the saucer. She pulled her internal telephone receiver toward her and dialed the direct line to the king's private apartment. The king was sitting at his writing desk, receiving his morning medical briefing when his wife entered. The Queen Consort placed the printed gate notice on top of his medical files. She stated that the sudden deactivation of the gate passes was a public insult to her daughter's dignity. She argued that her daughter was simply trying to assist with the structural upkeep of a family property. The king looked at the notice through his reading glasses. He appeared genuinely confused by the document. He remarked that he had not been informed about any security changes or property disputes regarding the lodge. The king's lack of awareness was the direct result of a calculated decision by his senior medical team. Because he was currently undergoing a structured recovery routine, his private secretaries routinely filtered out domestic palace arguments to protect his rest schedule. The Queen Consort used this gap to press her advantage. She demanded that the king sign an immediate sovereign override warrant to reactivate the passes before the design team returned to the estate that afternoon. The tension in the study grew when the prince walked in unannounced, carrying a black leather folder of his own. He did not wait for his father to speak. He placed a printed transcript of the previous night's digital gate logs directly beside the Queen Consort's notice. The transcript proved that the Queen Consort's office had used an old administrative password from 22 to bypass the standard security protocols. The prince addressed his father directly. He stated that the use of expired administrative codes to smuggle unvetted commercial operators into a state banquet was a direct threat to the safety of the household. He noted that the princess would not participate in any joint public engagements with the Queen Consort's family until a formal security review was completed. The king looked from his son to his wife. He was suddenly caught in a direct power deadlock between the two most powerful offices in the modern monarchy. He closed both folders. He acknowledged the severity of the protocol breach at the banquet table. He stated that the protocol office would need to conduct a full independent audit of the Queen Consort's digital access system before any gate passes could be reviewed. This delay was a significant tactical defeat for the Queen Consort. She knew that an official audit would expose the full extent of her office's efforts to expand her family's footprint within the estate. A mystery remained regarding a specific financial document that the prince pulled from the bottom of his leather folder. The document was a private bank wire receipt originating from a corporate account in Zurich, Switzerland. The funds had been transferred directly to the commercial art gallery business owned by the Queen Consort's daughter just 48 hours prior to the state dinner. The resolution of the mystery emerged when the prince explained the connection to the London design firm. The Zurich corporate account belonged to the parent company of the exact same design firm that the Queen Consort's daughter had brought to the state dinner. The financial trail proved that the placement of the business partners at the high table was not a casual social favor. It was part of a commercial sponsorship agreement that her gallery had secured in exchange for providing high-level access to royal circles. This fact shifted the entire nature of the conflict. It was no longer a simple domestic argument about seating cards or family status. It was a matter of commercial exploitation of a state function for private financial gain. The Queen Consort did not look at the bank receipt. She stood up from her chair and walked toward the window, looking out over the courtyard of her residence. She stated that her office would cooperate fully with the protocol audit, but she noted that family unity was difficult to maintain when every action was treated with suspicion. She left the study without another word, her silk skirt rustling sharply against the doorframe. The prince remained with his father to finalize the security directives for the afternoon. The gate passes remained deactivated, and the digital token system was locked down under new encryption keys managed exclusively by the prince's team. The first line of defense had held, but the public fallout from the banquet floor was already beginning to leak into the early editions of the London afternoon newspapers. Midnight at the cottage. The princess sat at the old pine table in her small kitchen, a single stoneware mug of herbal tea steaming next to her right hand. The clock on the wall showed exactly 20 minutes past midnight. The only other illumination in the room came from the blue screen of her personal tablet, which displayed a long list of deactivated security credentials. The prince walked in from the rear hallway, carrying a heavy folder of printed internal communications from the protocol office. He pulled out a wooden chair and sat down directly across from his wife. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It was a copy of the formal demand, sent directly to the king's private secretary. The document requested an immediate and permanent removal of all secondary gate passes issued under the Queen Consort's administrative code. The princess looked over the text, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper. She stated that the security of the royal park had been entirely compromised for private profit. She noted that the household would not accept any half measures or compromises from the palace press office regarding the incident. The prince agreed completely. He had already spent the last 2 hours reviewing the security logs from the castle gatehouse. The logs confirmed the earlier mystery. The king had already retired to his private apartments at precisely 9:30 on the night of the state dinner due to overwhelming physical fatigue from his ongoing treatment schedule. The king had been completely asleep when the crystal goblet shattered on the parquet floor of the dining hall. This meant the Queen Consort had acted entirely on her own authority when she confronted the prince in the Waterloo Chamber corridor. She had relied on the king's absence to protect her daughter's business partners from an immediate formal eviction by the palace guards. The realization that the king was being kept in the dark by his own wife's staff shifted the nature of the confrontation. The couple was no longer just dealing with a pushy family member. They were dealing with a systematic effort to use the king's vulnerability to expand the influence of the Queen Consort's family circle within the sovereign estates. The princess picked up her pen. She signed her name at the bottom of a formal security review request. The document effectively canceled the Queen Consort's daughter's gate access passes to every private sector of the grounds. The tension escalated when the prince's phone buzzed with an incoming text alert from his senior communications chief. The message stated that a prominent London tabloid editor had just reached out to the palace press pool for a comment. An anonymous source using a burner phone from the Victoria area had leaked a highly detailed story about a sudden disagreement over seating arrangements at the state banquet. The draft article used the phrase "royal friction" and painted the princess as overly rigid regarding traditional protocol. This leak was a predictable retaliatory move by the Queen Consort's personal press team. They wanted to frame the issue as a petty domestic argument between two women, completely hiding the reality of the Zurich bank wires and the unvetted commercial design team. The princess did not flinch when the prince read the text aloud. She stated that the media leak would backfire the moment the formal audit records were handed over to the Government Security Committee. She noted that the public would have very little sympathy for an international corporate scheme operating out of a state dinner. The prince immediately dialed the direct line to the tabloid editor's legal representative, bypassing the standard palace media officers. He told the legal representative that if the newspaper published any story containing false claims about the security incident, the prince's office would immediately release the full, verified gate logs and the Zurich bank receipts to the public broadsheets. He stated that the household would protect its boundaries using every legal means available. The threat was highly effective. The tabloid editor withdrew the story from the morning print run within 15 minutes of the call, replacing it with a generic piece about the Belgian delegation's departure. The immediate media threat was neutralized, but a larger mystery remained regarding how the Queen Consort's staff had managed to obtain the internal security codes for the secondary cottage at the lodge in the first place. Those specific encryption codes were supposed to be rotated every 90 days by the park rangers. The prince opened the second section of his folder to reveal an internal email trail from the previous spring. The email showed that a low-level administrative clerk in the master of the household's department had accidentally forwarded the entire security manifest to a shared printer room used by multiple palace offices. The clerk had been reassigned to a different department, but the codes had obviously been saved by someone working in the Queen Consort's private circle. This meant the security breach had been built on a foundation of long-term digital surveillance within the palace infrastructure. The princess stood up from the table, closing the safe folder and placing the signed security document into her leather briefcase. She told the prince that the gate guards must be informed of the past deactivations before the 5 o'clock morning shift change. She noted that the boundaries of their home would be enforced at the gatehouse, regardless of any objections from London. The house grew quiet again as the kitchen lights were turned off. The battle lines had been drawn in black ink, and the actual physical enforcement of the eviction was set to take place at the main security barrier in less than 12 hours. The standoff at the security gate. A black commercial van slowed to a stop before the iron security barrier at the estate's service gate. The driver rolled down his window, letting in the damp morning air, and held out a laminated plastic vehicle pass toward the gatekeeper's kiosk. The pass bore the blue letterhead of the Queen Consort's office and was dated for the current month. The gatekeeper did not press the button to raise the heavy hydraulic barrier. Instead, he stepped out of the booth holding a portable barcode scanner connected to the Central Park Ranger network. He ran the red laser light across the plastic card. A loud, double-tone beep sounded from the handheld unit, and the small display screen flashed with a red warning message: "Access suspended." The driver explained that he was transporting interior styling equipment on behalf of the Queen Consort's daughter for the Lodge Cottage project. He stated that his company had been explicitly cleared for entry by the Queen Consort's transportation office the previous Thursday. The gatekeeper shook his head. He informed the driver that all temporary access tokens issued under that specific administrative account had been permanently revoked by an executive order from the Prince's Land Office. He instructed the driver to turn the vehicle around and park in the public turnout lane outside the main boundary fence. The physical barrier remained down, creating an immediate traffic tailback on the narrow access road. Within 5 minutes, a dark blue saloon car pulled up directly behind the commercial van. The Queen Consort's daughter stepped out from the rear seat, leaving the door swung open. She was wearing a heavy trench coat and carrying a folder of project files under her arm. She walked straight to the security kiosk, her leather boots splashing through the shallow puddles on the tarmac. She demanded to know why her contractors were being blocked from accessing the estate during an active working week. The gatekeeper maintained his professional posture, keeping his hands loosely clasped in front of his equipment belt. He repeated the instruction regarding the executive order. He noted that any requests for a temporary override must be submitted in writing to the master of the household's office at least 48 hours in advance. The confrontation at the gatehouse quickly moved into a direct legal standoff when she pulled out her personal mobile phone to contact her mother's private secretary in London. She stated that the Queen Consort was currently preparing a sovereign emergency warrant to reinstate the gate permissions. She argued that local park rangers did not possess the legal authority to overrule an active directive from the Queen Consort on Crown land. This claim was a major legal exaggeration, but it created an immediate crisis for the gate staff. Under the historic park bylaws, an emergency sovereign warrant signed by the monarch can theoretically bypass standard estate protocols during times of national security crises or state transitions. The gatekeeper did not argue with her. He picked up his secure internal telephone line and reported the vehicle block directly to the chief ranger's office. The tension escalated when a convoy of 2 green security vehicles belonging to the prince's personal protections detail arrived at the gatehouse from the direction of the cottage. The officers did not exit their cars, but they parked directly behind the hydraulic barrier, establishing a secondary line of physical containment. The message from the couple was completely clear. They were not relying on administrative paperwork alone to protect their boundaries. They were enforcing the eviction using their own direct security personnel. A mystery remained regarding who had tipped off the Queen Consort's daughter about the exact timing of the gate lockdown. The deactivation of the codes had occurred past midnight, and the official notices were not scheduled to be uploaded to the general staff portal until 9 o'clock that morning. The security coordinator began an immediate trace of the local network transmissions from the estate office. He discovered that an internal email containing the new gatehouse manifests had been opened at 4 o'clock in the morning from a desktop computer located in the castle linen rooms. The login profile used to access that specific computer belonged to a veteran housekeeper who had worked for the royal family since the late 1990s. The investigation into the linen room login revealed the true connection. The housekeeper was the sister-in-law of a personal chauffeur who had been employed by the Queen Consort's family for over 15 years. The information had been passed via a quick private text message at dawn, allowing the Queen Consort's daughter to mobilize her design team in a desperate attempt to cross the barrier before the guard shift changed. This discovery proved that the domestic intelligence network within the palace walls was still actively operating to protect the interests of the Queen's family. The standoff at the gatehouse ended without a physical breach. At precisely 10 o'clock, a formal communication was transmitted from the protocol office to her mobile phone. The text was explicit. It stated that the king had declined to sign the emergency sovereign warrant requested by the Queen Consort's office. The king had officially confirmed that all localized estate security decisions within the royal park fell under the exclusive jurisdiction of the direct heir to the throne. The Queen Consort's daughter walked back to her blue saloon car, slamming the door behind her with enough force to rattle the window glass. She instructed her driver to turn the vehicle toward the main London highway. The commercial van followed her away from the security barrier, leaving the entrance completely clear for the regular morning staff shifts. The physical attempt to challenge the eviction had failed, and the keys to the estate remained firmly in the hands of the princess. A definitive boundary. The double doors of the protocol office's main suite closed with a definitive, heavy click. The prince stood by the long conference table, tossing a blue plastic storage drive onto the center of the wooden layout board. Beside the drive lay a stack of formal property logs bearing the green seal of the Crown Estate Commissioners. The time for quiet negotiations behind the gallery curtains was officially over. The prince looked across the room at the master of the household. He stated that the unauthorized tenancy of the secondary cottage at the lodge was legally terminated as of 12 o'clock that afternoon. He noted that all future property requests regarding the estate must clear the heir's land board before any keys were cut. The master of the household nodded once, his pen poised over his executive logbook. He signed his name to the bottom of the formal property eviction schedule. The administrative action was immediate, but the physical reality of the eviction required careful management. The secondary cottage still contained dozens of expensive fabric samples, structural blueprints, and high-end furniture units that the Queen Consort's daughter's design team had moved onto the property over the previous 3 weeks. Under the terms of the eviction order, these items were classified as unauthorized commercial property on a secure sovereign site. 2 neutral palace logistics vans arrived at the lodge courtyard at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The drivers were accompanied by an official inventory officer from the Royal Finance Office. They carried large cardboard storage crates and rolls of protective heavy packing tape. The staff began clearing the cottage rooms in absolute silence, systematically logging every single design folder and sample book before placing it into the vans. The tension resurfaced when a senior administrative official from the Queen Consort's office arrived at the courtyard on foot. He held a signed letter from the Queen Consort's private secretary, demanding a 24-hour extension to allow the daughter's personal assistants to oversee the packing process. The inventory officer did not pause his work. He handed the official a copy of the king's signed refusal from the morning gatehouse standoff. The document confirmed the ultimate reality of the palace hierarchy. The king had officially endorsed his son's authority over the localized estate boundaries, rendering any letters from the Queen Consort's office completely invalid on estate land. The presence of the king's signature on that refusal letter resolved a major mystery that had been circulating through the palace corridors all morning. Courtiers had wondered whether the king would attempt to create a diplomatic compromise to keep the peace with his wife. The answer lay in a private meeting that had occurred in the king's study at the royal residence at 7 o'clock that morning. The prince had presented his father with the complete financial dossier tracking the Zurich bank wires. When the king saw the direct connection between the commercial design firm and his stepdaughter's art gallery business, his stance changed instantly. He realized that the integrity of the state banquet had been compromised for private corporate gain. The king was a traditionalist regarding the dignity of the crown. The moment the commercial exploitation was proven, any domestic protection for the Queen Consort's daughter vanished from his agenda. By 4 o'clock, the logistics vans were completely loaded. The drivers closed the rear doors and drove out through the estate gate, heading directly toward her private residence in Wiltshire. The secondary cottage at the lodge was completely empty, and the keys were officially returned to the park ranger headquarters. The public fallout from the banquet floor incident was successfully contained by the evening press deadline, because the tabloid story had been killed by the prince's legal team the previous night. The morning broadsheets only carried standard, positive coverage of the Belgian diplomatic delegation's departure. The princess returned to her normal routine at the cottage that afternoon. She spent the evening hours with her children in the garden, completely detached from the bureaucratic machinery of the main castle. She had achieved her primary objective without issuing a